Okay, you know what? Whatever. Also, I saw Wirtual just post a new tweet, so I'm just gonna find what Wirtual wrote, okay, real quick. Wirtual said this: the Trackmania snow car is super fun, but competitively it introduces some big issues, and I think it would be talked about sooner rather than later. It's a thread. Holy, this is a long thread. Okay, are we gonna get into this right now? Okay, let's read it. Now let's read it. Okay, Virtual, what do you have to say here? The Trackmania snow car is super fun, but competitively introduces some big issues, and I think it would be talked about sooner rather than later. World record on slippy snow. I drove this run on my analog keyboard using custom steering profile from 0 to 60%. Okay, and let's see the record. So you can see his inputs. He is, I don't think he's able to, he's able to steer more than 60%. So I think he presses a button. Or he has a better analog input. He's customized his analog input to help him steer more smoothly. And he drove world record. And he did this offline because this is hard to do on stream. The problem I have with the snow car is that it's very advantageous for analog devices. Keyboard players have next to no chance for competing for top records, even with action keys. If Nadeo wants to stay true to these words from last year, then something really has to change. And then he highlighted this. When players settle on learning how to play with a keyboard or controller, it really means something to us, and we always aspire to keep your training valuable. Okay? With more controller-favored cars like Rally coming out next year, I and others really want to have clear rules from Nadeo on specifically what is and isn't allowed. Traditionally, players have used DX tweak on these cars in Trackmania United to get better times. What now? Since these cars are so sensitive to regular input, and the fastest way to drive is to prevent sliding at all times, I have a video on this coming out, by the way. Okins, how long is that video from being released? Controller players have historically used DX tweak to limit their steering range from 0 to 100% to 0 to 70% and below to get control and achieve better times. Going forward, it would be really great to know if the following are allowed and to what extent. Limiting the steering range of an analog device, setting custom analog profiles, and if anything is being done to bridge the increasing gap between keyboard and controller and wheel. For full transparency, this is the keyboard profile I used to run in the run above. With in-game action keys, I would probably only at best achieve times of plus 1500s. Okay. And with no action keys at all, I'd be surprised of getting within 2 seconds of this time. There's a significant portion of the player base that are competitive on keyboard, who currently are at a big disadvantage anytime the snow car is used. What should they do? And with future updates. Some community members will say just switch to controller if it's faster, and if that's Nadeo's new stance on it, then okay. But it really does not seem like a great idea to disenfranchise a large part of the player base in this way. Personally, I really enjoy playing on keyboard and would not have much fun playing Trackmania on controller. Even if I could magically transfer 10 years of muscle memory and be just as fast. If nothing is added to 8 keyboard players in-game, I'm gonna use analog keys from now on. Some people will refer to the rules from Midori incident, which is defined that it's not allowed to lock the steering at an optimized angle and drastically trivialize mechanics that require skill to execute. To say the way I drove this run is cheating, right? So that's what they're saying here. In my opinion, this case is different and needs clarification. Midori ruling was written under different circumstances and it doesn't address the exact issue at hand. Specifically about the thing mentioned earlier, are you allowed to limit analog curves and custom action key profiles? If Nadeo considers this one playstyle to be cheated, then that's fine for me. It's at least preferable to hearing nothing back at all. All in all, I hope that they allow analog keyboards to be used in this way, as it gives top keyboard players an alternative to pad. Okay, so just to quickly dissect this last statement I think is wrong. I think this is wrong. And the reason is he's saying, all in all, I hope they allow analog keyboards to be used in this way, right? When he says in this way, he refers to this way. Okay? This is not a regular analog keyboard. Don't get me wrong, analog keyboards should be allowed, 100%. But just like controller, analog, when I go halfway on the controller, I'm going halfway in-game. When I go all the way on the controller, I go all the way in-game, right? This is not what's happening here. This is not what's happening here. Here, what's happening is that he goes, like, this is regular analog. Like, this is actively, like, adjusting your analog profile. Right? I think an analog keyboard is equivalent to an analog D-pad. But if you start adjusting your analog keyboard, it's the same as adjusting the analog D-pad. And then that's DX tweak. Then we're introducing DX tweak into the game. I think we shouldn't introduce DX tweak into the game. Because technically, Wirtual could drive this exact time without using the 0 to 60% on his analog keyboard. Right? He would just have to press more precise. But there's nothing stopping a person from analog keyboard driving this time. Right? You would just have to press more precise buttons. So if you introduce DX tweak, then all of a sudden, all controller players will start using DX tweak, and the game is going to become 10 billion times more complicated, and also you would have to make DX tweak profiles for every single map all the time. Right? So Wirtual says something specifically that I agree with. And what I agree with is when he said... here, where was it he said it? He said that there's a significant portion of the player base that are competitive on keyboard, who currently are at a big disadvantage. This is true. And what Wirtual is arguing is specifically about analog keyboards. Right? None of this is going to affect regular keyboards. So yeah, all in all, I hope they allow analog keyboards to be used in this way. I hope they allow analog keyboards in general, but I don't think there's any ruling saying analog keyboards are not okay. Because an analog keyboard is the exact same as a D-pad. Analog keyboards are the exact same as using a controller. I think the issue is if you allow an outside third-party software to give you a preferable, like a better analog angle. And that counts for both analog keyboards and for analog controllers. Right? So I think that a custom steering profile, I think, is not good. I think that's a slippery slope. Analog keyboard, great. And with an analog keyboard, you can drive the exact same time as you can with an analog controller. 100%. 100% you can. I think the custom steering profile, that's a slippery slope. What do you guys think, chat? It's like limiting your joystick to 60% when you're full steer. Yes, non-analog keyboards are in a disadvantage. Yes. What Wirtual is arguing here, like technically he's talking like all keyboard players are at a disadvantage, but what he's arguing here, at no point, get this right, Wirtual is not saying that keyboard players are. He's basically conceding that keyboard is not usable anymore. If you want to use a keyboard, you have to use an analog keyboard. That's what he's saying, right? That's why he's using an analog keyboard. But yeah, either way, so he's arguing that he wants to be able to do this right here. He wants to be able to create a custom profile for his analog keyboard to drive specific maps better. I don't agree with that, because I don't set a custom analog profile for my controller for driving specific maps. If you have an analog keyboard, you can do the exact same inputs as you can on an analog controller. There's no need to make third-party software included. Right? No need. And people do that though, but it's not allowed. DX Tweak is not allowed in the game. Yeah, I guess you're right, Eriso. We need analog keyboards with deeper key presses. But like, I would argue that this motion right here, going from here to here, this range right here is not much different than the range that a keyboard press has. It's kind of close to the same. But I agree, if you had a deeper keyboard press, it would mimic a controller better. It would limit a controller better. Or sorry, it would mimic a controller better. But I just, in my personal, let's have a poll. Let's have a poll. Can we have a poll in chat? Third-party software in the game, yes or no? I hard disagree. I think the game is just going into a new era where analog devices are better, and you could argue that they have been better since bobsleigh was a thing. And analog keyboards are just gonna be what keyboard players are gonna go for if they really don't want to switch to pad. Right? So you're against Open Planet. Open Planet is publicly endorsed by Nadeo. Make the poll. Yeah, I'll make the poll. All right, vote in the poll. Should third-party software be allowed for analog input? And also, I wanna just state that even if this software was put into Open Planet, it would not be allowed because it directly affects your gameplay. The same way as speed sliding is not allowed. Like the SD Open Planet plugins are not allowed. Right? The same way, because they're too effective of gameplay. Yeah, and virtual suggestion right here. Virtual suggestion down here will not affect any normal keyboard players at all. It will affect him and a few others that have an analog keyboard, and will make people have to switch to analog keyboard. But this is not good. I really don't think third-party software is a smart idea. Is there an auto speed slide plugin? No, but there is a plugin that exists that shows you the exact speed slide that you need. There is also a plugin that uses an AI to macro speed slides. So if you go into a speed slide, you can press this button and the AI will do the speed slide theoretically perfect for you. Right? Never ever is that gonna be a thing in the game. People have made that, and it does exist. Don't use that. Shorty says, I have a potential solution to this. One single action key that automatically holds the correct angle. No, this is too strong. This is so this is not gonna work either. If you have one button that holds the angle, that takes away all of the skill of the game. That would be bad. But he cooked the plugin to test it out. Imagine that. Just auto aim assist. So that would just take away. So the majority of you guys say that this isn't supposed to be allowed. I don't think it's supposed to be allowed either. And I strongly urge Nadeo not to have third-party software. But I strongly urge keyboard players, if you want to remain keyboard and you want to be really competitive on these surfaces, then sure. If you want to invest $100 on a keyboard to save, what Wirtual says, by the way, if you want to spend $100 on a keyboard to save, what did he say he would save? He said he would save 0.15. If you want to spend $100 to save 0.15 with normal action keys, do that. Yo, Nixalai. But like even Wirtual says, we're talking 0.15. Right? So this is the difference between Wirtual being, now let's look at this map. This is the difference between Wirtual being number 1 world or number 4 world, okay? That's, I mean, is there really a need to make a difference? Like, it's not gonna affect 1 million plus of the player base. It's gonna affect people going for world records. And those people don't mind buying an analog keyboard anyway. I really don't think so. Like, it will affect like there's less than 100 people in the world that are capable of getting world records on some of the really hard maps, right? And out of those 100 people, some of them are keyboard players. And it's only gonna affect those people. It's only gonna affect those people. The rest of the player base will not notice it. I agree with Wirtual. Analog inputs, like analog keyboards, you should get that in the game. Like if you're a competitive keyboard player, investing in an analog input to save 0.015 seconds is probably worth it. Yes. But I don't think it's like, I don't think it's requiring that you need a third-party software. Nobody likes being at an inherent disadvantage. If I use D-pad/keyboard on some tricks, they have to get the controller. What do you mean, Scrappy? The snow car will definitely be used in matchmaking next season. They will have stuff like that in the seasons. He switches for ice. Yeah, but on an analog keyboard, I'm pretty confident you have a button on the keyboard to switch between analog and non-analog. So they will be fine on ice. Like you can see that. You can see that in this section here, right? I'm pretty confident he switches to non-analog on the turn. On this right-hander. Right? Yeah. So here he has analog, and then he presses a button and switches to non-analog right here to get the instant 100% steering. Or he just uses different keys. I mean, that's fair enough. That's true. That might also just be different keys. But either way, they won't be at a disadvantage for ice. Pay to win? I wouldn't argue it's pay to win. I would argue that if you want to play keyboard and you need an analog keyboard, that's because you really don't want to use controller. Because there's no game that has 100% equal in all input devices. What if they remove analog nature of controllers too? I think that would make the game more boring if it didn't have analog inputs. But that's just me. Like, TM Stadium used to be close, but that was only one surface. I mean, technically it wasn't. Couldn't you argue, Rizal, that technically Stadium does have a slight pad advantage on full speed maps? Because you get better angles on the SDs. And then you could argue that on a perfect world, you would never be able to beat a perfect pad version of a full speed map. It's just rhythm. I think TMNF was a simpler game than TM 2020. There's way too many different surfaces and variables in TM 2020. And the more complex the game is, I'm sure the more difficult it is to balance everything. And again, like, keyboard has an advantage on ice, pad has an advantage on smooth steering. Like, there's benefits and takeaways. Like, technically, if you want to be the best player in the game, you need to learn multiple input styles. Like, if you want to be the best on every single surface, right? FPS games give controller players a slight aimbot, but that's also a huge hot topic. Like, that's also a very hot debate. I don't know if Trackmania should enter that. But I mean, at the end of the day, it is only Nadeo that can make remind you that Grenade needs to use software to simply use his wheel. I mean, that's not to change anything in the game. The software is to make the game recognize that you're playing on a steering wheel, right? It's the same. I use third-party software to make the game think this is an Xbox controller, but I don't like that. It doesn't affect gameplay, right? Yeah, his wheel still does 0 to 100 if you turn. Like, that's something different, right? Software is to reduce full steer from 900 degrees to 150. He can do that in-game if he wants to. Like, I can show you, right? There's a slider right here that does the same thing. He just uses the software, I'm guessing, because he also plays other games, right? So that doesn't matter whether or not he uses the software for it or not. Right? I'm pretty confident that third-party software for using a steering wheel, that's not the same. I use what's it called, DS4. I use DS4 for my PlayStation controller, because otherwise I can't keybind some of the buttons. Like, there's something broken there. Yeah, it's the custom steering angles that's a problem. Like, he still steers from 0 to 100%. But, like, I would like to hear it from, maybe from Scrappy and Arizo and some other pro players, if there's pro players in chat. Do you think custom steering profiles should be in the game? Like, custom, like specifically what Wirtual has here. And this isn't just for analog keyboard. This is for, you can do this on a controller as well. Alright, Arizo might not be a pro player, but he's a competitive, high-ranked, can drive world records on maps, Div 1 player, okay? Like, this is not great. I don't think this is good. This makes the game a macro game rather than actually driving. I think so too. I think that analog keyboards should and are allowed, by the way. At no point, I don't think at any point Nadeo said you're not allowed to play on an analog keyboard. An analog keyboard is exactly the same as playing on a controller. You just have buttons to press instead of a stick to turn. But effectively, it's the same thing. So an analog keyboard is fine. But custom steering angles or custom steering profiles, that's different.